Welcome to the deep dive, where we take a whole bunch of information and break it down, into the most important pieces.
Right.
Today, we are diving deep into OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations.
A very important topic.
Oh, absolutely. And this deep dive is brought to you by Safety One Source.
Yes.
So this standard, 1926.450 to be exact, is packed with crucial information for anyone involved in keeping work sites safe.
It really is.
Especially when working at heights.
Especially working at heights.
Yeah.
It's a vital resource for safety professionals,
Right.
supervisors and workers alike.
Yeah.
Understanding these regulations is the foundation for preventing scaffolding-related accidents.
Yeah.
And ensuring everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
Yeah. Right off the bat, I was struck by the sheer number of scaffold types defined in the standard.
There are a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing how many different configurations there are, each designed for specific work scenarios. We've got everything from the familiar supported scaffolds to some terms that sound like they belong on a pirate ship.
Right.
Bosun's chair, for example.
Uh-huh.
What exactly is that, and where would you typically encounter one?
Well, imagine a single worker suspended high in the air performing tasks like window washing or facade repairs on a skyscraper.
Yeah.
That's where a bosun's chair comes in.
Yeah.
It's essentially a suspended seat or sling attached to a single rope, allowing for very specific and often precarious work.
That definitely sounds like a job where safety is absolutely paramount.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific regulations in the standard that address the unique risks of using a bosun's chair?
Absolutely. OSHA 1926.451 I-8 specifically addresses single-point adjustable suspension scaffolds,
Okay.
which is the technical term for a bosun's chair.
Okay.
The standard mandates a secondary means of support independent of the suspension rope to prevent a complete fall if the primary rope fails. Also, the anchorage point for the suspension rope has to be capable of supporting at least 4 times the maximum intended load.
Wow.
Think of it as a safety net within a safety net.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to rely on a single point of suspension when you're hundreds of feet in the air.
Right.
Speaking of intriguing names, I also came across crawling boards in the standard.
Uh-huh.
The name alone conjures up a very specific image.
Yeah, crawling boards, sometimes called chicken ladders,
Oh, wow.
are used in situations where you can't erect a traditional scaffold like on a sloped roof.
Okay.
They provide a stable walking surface for workers who need to move along these angles.
So instead of a full platform, you're essentially creating a secure walkway across a sloped surface.
That's right.
What are some key safety considerations for using crawling boards, according to the standard?
OSHA 1926.451 SHE outlines the requirements for crawling boards.
Okay.
And it emphasizes secure attachment to the roof surface.
Right.
They must be fastened with cleats or hooks to prevent slipping, and workers must use fall protection when using them.
It's interesting how the standard addresses not only the types of scaffolds, but also the safety components and procedures that apply across the board.
Precisely the terminology used in the standard highlights a holistic approach to scaffolding safety.
Yeah.
It's not just about having the right equipment.
Right.
It's about using it correctly and implementing comprehensive safety measures.
And speaking of key terminology, there are a few terms that really jumped out at me as essential for understanding the regulations and fostering a culture of safety on work sites. Terms like competent person, personal fall arrest system, and maximum intended load.
Right.
These seem to be recurring themes throughout the OSHA standard.
They are, and for good reason.
Yeah.
These terms represent foundational principles of scaffolding safety.
Right.
Let's start with competent person. This isn't just anyone on the job site.
Right.
It's someone with the knowledge, training, and authority to identify and mitigate scaffolding hazards. They're responsible for everything from inspecting the scaffold before use to ensuring workers are properly trained and using the equipment safely.
So the competent person is really the linchpin of scaffolding safety, the one who makes sure everyone is on the same page and following the regulations.
Absolutely. They're the eyes and ears on the ground, so to speak, ensuring the safety of everyone involved in scaffolding operations.
That's a huge responsibility. Now, personal fall arrest system sounds pretty self-explanatory. System designed to prevent falls. But what are the specific components of a fall arrest system, and what does the standard say about their use?
A personal fall arrest system, as defined in OSHA 1926.500B, consists of an anchorage connectors, a body harness,
Okay.
and may include a lanyard deceleration device, lifeline, or suitable combinations of these.
Okay.
The anchorage is a secure point where the system is attached to the structure, the connector link the components, and the harness distributes the forces of a fall to prevent serious injury.
So it's a multi-layered system that relies on each component working together seamlessly to prevent a worker from hitting the ground in the event of a fall.
That's right, and OSHA 1926.451 G1 specifically mandates the use of personal fall arrest systems for workers on scaffolds more than 10 feet above a lower level.
That makes sense. As the height increases, the potential for serious injury from a fall also increases. What about maximum intended load? I mean, that refers to how much weight a scaffold can safely support, right?
You're exactly right. Every scaffold has a maximum intended load,
Okay.
which is calculated based on the strength of its components, and the intended use exceeding that load can put immense stress on the scaffold,
Yeah.
leading to instability and potential collapse.
So it's not just about the workers themselves, it's about the weight of tools, materials, and anything else that might be on the scaffold platform.
Precisely, OSHA 1926.451 Air 1 emphasizes the importance of considering all potential loads when erecting and using a scaffold. It even specifies that scaffold components must be capable of supporting at least 4 times the maximum intended load without failure.
That's a significant safety factor built into the standard. It really highlights the importance of careful planning and load management when working with scaffolds.
Absolutely. And speaking of potential hazards, another term that caught my eye in the standard is unstable objects.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster when it comes to scaffolding. What exactly does the standard consider unstable objects, and why are they such a concern?
OSHA 1926.451 A2 explicitly prohibits using unstable objects to support scaffolds.
Okay.
This includes things like loose bricks, barrels, boxes, or anything that could shift, move, or collapse under the weight of the scaffold.
Right.
You need a solid and reliable foundation for a scaffold to be safe, and unstable objects simply don't provide that.
So it's about recognizing that the stability of a scaffold relies not just on the structure itself, but also on the foundation upon which it rests.
Exactly. You can have the strongest, most well-built scaffold in the world, but if it's resting on an unstable base, it's still a major safety hazard.
This is already proving to be a fascinating deep dive into OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface.
There's much more to explore, and I'm eager to delve into the nuances of these regulations. After all, the more we understand the why behind these rules, the better equipped we are to create truly safe working environments.
Well said. We'll continue our deep dive into OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations in just a moment. But first, a quick message from Safety One Source. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about some of the foundational terms in OSHA's scaffolding standard, those concepts that really underpin safe work practices at heights.
And it's amazing how these seemingly simple terms like competent person or maximum intended load actually encompass so much when it comes to real-world safety on a job site. It's like each term is a doorway into a whole set of procedures and best practices.
That's a great way to put it. These terms aren't just definitions.
Right.
They're reminders of the interconnectedness of scaffolding safety.
As we continue our deep dive, I'm curious to explore some other terms that stood out to me, especially in relation to the different types of scaffolds we discussed earlier. For example, guardrail system, falling object protection, and access all seem pretty straightforward, but I suspect there's more to them than meets the eye.
You're right to be curious. Those terms might seem simple on the surface, but they represent some of the most crucial safety considerations for anyone working on or around scaffolds. Let's start with guardrail system. While the concept of a rail that prevents falls seems obvious, OSHA 1926.451 G1 gets very specific about what constitutes a proper guardrail system on a scaffold.
So it's not just about throwing up any old rail. What are some of the key requirements that the standard outlines?
Well, the standard mandates a complete system that includes top rails, mid rails, and toe boards. The top rail must be 42 inches plus or minus 3 inches above the walking working level, providing that upper barrier to prevent someone from falling over the edge. The mid rail is installed halfway between the top rail and the platform surface, adding an extra layer of protection.
Yeah.
And then there are the toe boards, which are installed at the base of the platform to prevent tools and materials from rolling or sliding off the edge.
So you're essentially creating a three-sided barrier around the work area to contain both people and objects, which brings us to falling object protection.
Yeah.
I imagine this is all about protecting those who are working below the scaffold from anything that might accidentally fall from above.
Exactly. And OSHA 1926.451 provides several options for falling object protection. It could be as simple as toe boards on the scaffold itself, or it might involve screens, canopies, or other barriers installed below the scaffold to catch or deflect falling objects. The choice of protection depends on the specific hazards and the work environment.
It's interesting how the standard takes a layered approach to safety, addressing hazards from multiple angles.
Yeah.
You've got the guardrails to protect those on the scaffold, and then you've got additional measures to protect those below.
It's all about minimizing risk at every level.
Now, access might seem like the most self-explanatory term of all. I mean, it's just how you get onto the scaffold, right?
Yeah.
But I have a feeling OSHA has something to say about that as well.
You're absolutely right. Safe access to and from the scaffold is just as important as any other safety measure. OSHA 1926.451E mandates that scaffolds more than 10 feet high must have a safe and secure means of access, such as ladders, stair towers, or ramps. This ensures that workers aren't climbing up makeshift structures or trying to scale the scaffold frame itself, which would be incredibly dangerous.
It's about eliminating those shortcuts that might seem convenient in the moment but could lead to serious accidents. Having a designated and safe way to get on and off the scaffold is crucial.
Absolutely. And speaking of eliminating shortcuts, the standard also emphasizes the importance of training when it comes to scaffolding safety. OSHA 1926.454 states very clearly that anyone involved in erecting, dismantling, moving, operating, repairing, inspecting, or altering scaffolds must be trained by a qualified person. This ensures that everyone working with scaffolds understands the hazards, knows how to inspect and maintain the equipment, and can perform their tasks safely at heights.
So it's not just about having a competent person overseeing the work. It's about making sure that everyone on the team has a baseline level of knowledge and understanding when it comes to scaffolding safety.
Precisely. Training empowers workers to identify hazards, follow procedures, and communicate concerns effectively. It's an investment in safety that pays dividends in the long run.
This deep dive is really highlighting how OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations are about creating a culture of safety from top to bottom, from the equipment itself to the people who use it.
That's an excellent observation. The definitions we've been discussing are like individual threads woven together to form a tapestry of safety practices.
And each thread is essential for the strength and integrity of the whole.
Speaking of essential components, let's talk about the heart of the scaffold platform. It's where the work happens, so its stability and integrity are paramount. OSHA 1926.451B lays out specific requirements for scaffold platforms, ensuring they provide a safe and reliable working surface.
What are some of the key considerations when it comes to the platform itself? What is the standard mandate to ensure its stability and safety?
OSHA 1926.451B1 requires that platforms be fully planked or decked with no large gaps or openings, creating a continuous and stable work surface. The planking must be strong enough to support its own weight, plus 4 times the maximum intended load, meaning it has a substantial safety factor built in.
That's reassuring to know. It sounds like the standard really emphasizes the importance of a solid and reliable platform capable of handling the stresses of various work activities.
Absolutely. And to further enhance stability, OSHA 1926.451B7 mandates that platforms must extend over their supports by at least 6 inches, but no more than 12 inches. This ensures that the weight is distributed evenly and prevents the platform from tipping over.
I've always noticed that slight overhang of the platform beyond the scaffold frame, but I never really thought about the reason behind it. It's fascinating how these seemingly small details play such a significant role in overall safety.
It's all about anticipating potential hazards and designing the system to mitigate those risks.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. We've gone beyond simply defining terms and started to explore how those terms translate into real-world safety practices. It's clear that OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations aren't just about rules. They're about creating a comprehensive framework for safety that covers everything from equipment specifications to worker training and hazard mitigation.
I couldn't agree more. And while understanding the regulations is a crucial first step, it's equally important to understand how those regulations are applied on actual job sites where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
That's a great point. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back after a quick message to delve into some practical takeaways and actionable advice for anyone involved in scaffolding operations. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this episode really getting into the nuts and bolts of OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations. And it's been eye-opening to see how much detail and thought goes into creating a safe working environment at heights.
It really is. It's a testament to the importance of scaffolding safety.
Right.
These regulations are the result of years of experience, research, and unfortunately accidents that have taught us valuable lessons about what it takes to protect workers' lives.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to shift our focus from understanding the regulations to actually applying them on the job site. If you're a safety professional, a supervisor, or even a worker involved in scaffolding operations, What are some key takeaways you can implement right away to enhance safety on your work site?
One of the most important things is to move beyond simply handing workers a copy of the OSHA standard
Right.
and expecting them to absorb it all. We need to explain the why behind the regulations, show them how these rules translate into real-world safety practices,
Yeah.
and how following them can prevent accidents and save lives.
So it's about making that connection between the sometimes dry language of the regulations and the actual actions that keep people safe,
Right.
turning those words into a safety checklist that everyone on the team understands and follows.
Exactly. Another crucial step is to make sure all scaffolding is inspected regularly by a competent person.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a quick glance. I mean, a thorough examination of every component to ensure it's in good working order.
It's about catching those small issues before they become big problems.
Right.
A loose bolt today could be a catastrophic failure tomorrow.
That's a great point. And just as important, never allow workers to use damaged or defective scaffolding. No shortcuts, no exceptions. If it's not safe, it's not an option.
Safety over speed, always. And speaking of speed, I imagine that rushing can lead to mistakes and complacency, which are never good companions when working at heights.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial to foster a work environment where safety is prioritized over rushing to meet deadlines. Take the time to do things right, to double-check connections, to inspect equipment thoroughly.
Right.
Those extra minutes can be the difference between a safe workday and a tragedy.
And finally, I think it's essential to encourage open communication on the job site. Workers need to feel comfortable speaking up if they see something unsafe or if they have questions about scaffolding safety.
I couldn't agree more. Create a culture where safety is everyone's responsibility, not just the responsibility of the designated safety person. Empower workers to be proactive, to point out potential hazards, and to ask questions without fear of reprisal.
This has been an incredible deep dive into OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations. We've learned about the different types of scaffolds, decoded the key terminology, and most importantly, discussed how to apply this knowledge to create safer work environments.
Absolutely. And as we've emphasized throughout this deep dive, understanding these regulations is just the first step. The real impact comes from putting these safety principles into practice every day on the job site.
A huge thank you to Safety One Source for making this deep dive possible. We hope you found this exploration of OSHA's scaffolding safety regulations insightful and empowering. Remember, safety is a journey, not a destination. Let's all work together to build a world where every worker returns home safely at the end of the day.